A town in the United States. A town in the nuclear age. It's early evening. Two men sit in an office in the town hall. The mayor of the town, Sam Rice, and Civil Defense Director Bill Logan.
I think we finally got something going here, Sam. There are still some bugs in it, but at least we're on the way.
Good. What have you got there?
Well, first of all, here's the revised disaster plan I've been working on.
Looks like you've been burning the midnight oil.
Burning it? I run clean dry of this stuff.
Oh.
Sam, one of the main problems we've got to work out is communications.
I thought we were in pretty good shape there.
We're going to need more communications equipment in the emergency operating center.
Well, how much do you figure it'll cost?
Here's the brochure on the unit I think we should have. I know, it's more money than we figured on spending. But communications is one of the most important parts of the whole civil defense system, and we don't have nearly enough.
Even with the federal government's matching funds program, this is going to cost a bundle.
Well, how much is emergency protection worth, Sam? What kind of a price tag do you put on the safety of our wives and kids?
You don't have to sell me. Remember, civil defense is my responsibility to start with. But the council, they think we're spending too much money already.
It's about time they realize that we've got to extend ourselves a little if we're ever going to get any kind of adequate emergency program in this town.
Bill Logan, former officer in the United States Army, now retired, and appointed by Mayor Rice as Civil Defense Director 1 year ago. A man with a difficult job. Emergency, protection against enemy attack, protection against natural disaster. When and if they occur, Bill wants his town to be ready with a well-organized emergency plan. A plan that could save lives and property. Many of the larger municipalities have full-time paid directors. Some civil defense directors serve voluntarily on a part-time basis. Bill Logan is a full-time man, but his workday is never long enough for all the things he has to do. Take today, for instance. 9 a.m., a meeting with Harry Coyle, in charge of shelter management instruction for the town. His problem? Not enough people are taking the shelter management course. Shelter management is one of the most important elements in today's civil defense system. Handling of large groups of people in disaster situations calls for special knowledge of many kinds. Measures against nuclear disaster, in particular, demand completely new techniques and approaches. It was at Civil Defense Director Logan's suggestion that Harry attended a federal civil defense shelter management instruction course so he could come back and teach others. At school, Harry was impressed with the amount of civil defense planning that had been written up for instruction purposes. The possibility of nuclear warfare in our time has produced a library of civil defense studies which anticipates, as far as possible, the nature of the nuclear threat and ways in which its devastating effects might be contained. But if Harry Coyle is going to use this knowledge to good advantage, he's got to have people to teach. Many who are willing to learn say they just can't take the time. Heard it many times since he became the town's civil defense director. People always had so much to do. Bill has an idea. Maybe if they were to arrange a public presentation, work up a program that would make the people realize how important civil defense was to each of them, they might create more support for civil defense activities. Bill will look into it. just as he will follow up on many other matters during the day. 10 a.m. A visit to the owner of an office building on Main Street to see about the space to which shelter provisions are to be delivered.
Well, suppose we store them over here in these closets. That way I won't have to move any of my storage supplies.
That's no good, Mr. Lorenz. There's not enough room there. What about this section off the lower main corridor?
Can't do it. We use that for temporary rentals. You'd be surprised how many people want space for just a few months.
Isn't there any room at all off that corridor you could make available for the shelter provisions?
I don't see where. Look, don't get me wrong. I'm for civil defense 100%. But I got to think of my business.
Well, now, wait a minute. There, at the other end of the corridor, you've got some space marked development. What's that for?
Well, it's not being used right now. We're keeping that open for future plans. Hey, that's an idea. I could let you put the shelter provisions right in here. After all, civil defense is future plans, isn't it?
I'm glad you see it that way, Mr. Lorenz.
11:15 a.m. A phone call to Herman Bayless, a local mover. Arrangements have to be made to pick up the shelter provisions from the federal warehouse and deliver them to Mr. Lorenz building. Pickup and delivery from warehouse to community shelter, where the provisions will be stored, is the responsibility of the local government. Mr. Bayless is offering the use of one of his trucks without charge, a fact for which Director Logan, ever aware of his limited budget, is very grateful. 11:45 a.m. A visit from Bob Martinson, in charge of radiological training. Radiation detection instruments supplied by the federal government to local communities have arrived. Bob has checked out the equipment and reports it in good order. He also tells Bill that there has been a good turnout for radiological defense classes. 12 noon, a speaking engagement at a luncheon of a local civic group. Often the Civil Defense Director will be called upon to present talks. Here he has an opportunity to discuss local civil defense problems and the need for understanding and support of emergency programs.
I know it's hard for most of us to imagine what an actual nuclear emergency would be like. We'd rather not think about it. But somebody's got to do the thinking and the planning, just in case the need should arise. And as remote as the possibility may seem, it is a possibility. If this country should ever become the victim of a nuclear attack, hundreds, maybe thousands of our towns would be affected. More than anything else, there would be a need, a great need, for protection against dangerous radioactive fallout. Contrary to what a lot of people may think, it is possible for our country to survive a nuclear attack if we are prepared for it with an adequate civil defense. That defense begins right here in our town, in each and every town throughout the country. We all need public fallout shelters, more public fallout shelters. We need equipment for them. We need people trained in the special skills of civil defense. We need the support of our municipal governments. Finally, and most of all, we need a plain, common sense approach to the whole problem of civil defense, instead of a lot of emotional and defeatist attitudes.
1:30 p.m. A meeting with the town engineer to examine a plan for providing emergency services in case normal power sources are not available. Local private utility companies will be checked to determine the extent of their standby facilities. Bill will also contact highway, police, and fire departments to explore means of augmenting their capabilities to meet a possible nuclear emergency or natural disaster. 2:30 p.m., a visit to a local women's club for a meeting with the club officers. The women's club presents a gift to the local emergency organization in the form of a check covering the cost of cots and blankets for one of the town's larger public shelters. Since federal government shelter provisions include only survival items, such as food, water, and sanitation equipment, the check for the comfort items is good news to the local civil authorities.
Oh, by the way, Mrs. Clark, do you think that some of your other club members might be willing to help us out with the presentation we're planning?
Why, yes, I'm quite sure several of us would be interested.
Good. We're going to need a fairly large place for the presentation.
I think I can help you there, Mr. Logan. My husband is manager of the movie house here in town. I'm sure he'll be able to arrange for you to use the theater.
Fine. We'll want to show a few short films, present some demonstrations, first aid, survival techniques, the kind of thing families should be concerned with. Perhaps some of your other club members or their husbands might be willing to take part if they have some special knowledge that might have some bearing on civil defense.
I majored in psychology in college, Mr. Logan, and I once did a paper on group dynamics. It wasn't directly involved with civil defense, but if there's anything that I can do...
Well, it shouldn't be hard to apply your background in the shelter situation, for instance. Some very thorough psychological studies have been done on mass behavior in shelters. I'm sure you'll be able to make a very interesting contribution to the program.
Perhaps we can run a trailer at the theater advertising the civil defense presentation.
Say, what about a telephone campaign reminding people of the date?
Good idea. I'd like to see a big turnout for this. A town this size should have more people involved in emergency planning.
Why don't we circulate a questionnaire asking people to list any special skills they may have? I know several of our members have taken courses in home nursing.
Mrs. Sanders' nephew has an amateur radio license. I'm sure he'd be willing to help out.
The Civil Defense Director will try to make use of the talents of every available person who might be able to contribute in some way to emergency preparations. Even hobbies or spare time activities might be constructively put to use in civil defense programs. A shortwave amateur radio operator could serve in the local emergency communications setup. The photographic hobbyist may be enlisted to put together a pictorial presentation of the town's civil defense activities. Bill Logan knows that civil defense is not a one-man job, and that the citizens may possess many possibilities for assistance. "4:30 p.m., a visit to a factory on the outskirts of town. When checked as part of the federal government's National Fallout Shelter Survey Program, this building met government standards as a public shelter. Bill has obtained the owner's signature on a federal license indicating the owner's consent to use the building. "5:15 p.m., on the way back to the office, a call at a firehouse to check on arrangements for a training exercise in rescue operations, which is to be held at the shopping center plaza. Test alerts and exercises must be held periodically. 5:45 p.m. Back at his office, Bill undertakes further administrative details of organizing, planning, and budgeting. In case of nuclear attack, the services of all government agencies and departments of the community might be required simultaneously. New functions not normally a part of regular government must be provided for. The Civil Defense Director, as a representative of the local government, is responsible for seeing that the town is adequately supplied and staffed to meet all emergency needs. 7 p.m. Bill takes some of his problems to his friend and boss, Mayor Rice. The clock on the wall has long since registered the end of the workday, but for men like Bill Logan, deeply involved with civil defense planning for his community, the day has no end. Bill is just one civil defense director in one American town. Those who have taken on civil defense leadership in other municipalities and rural districts throughout the nation may have different problems to cope with, depending on the needs of their communities. But all will share the basic responsibility of protection for their people during emergency. In order to continue doing his job successfully, Bill Logan and all civil defense directors must keep in mind the major objectives of the National Civil Defense Program: to provide fallout protection for all of this nation's citizens, to develop the means to give timely warning to the nation of impending attack and attack hazards, to develop effective control and direction of emergency operations at all levels of government, to establish an effective emergency communication system among governmental authorities and with the public, to develop the capability to collect, evaluate, and disseminate information on radioactive fallout, to develop and operate systems whereby the nature and extent of damage resulting from enemy attack can be evaluated. Within the framework of these objectives, the local civil defense director functions as staff coordinator for his community's emergency planning and operations. The civil defense job is a big one, often frustrating, sometimes rewarding. It's a job that comes with the realities of our time, a challenge that can be met through civil defense leaders who understand the threat and have the ability to prepare their communities to meet it.